Hi everyone, this is Sonal, founder of Nube Technologies from India, applying AI to MTA. I'm so excited I'll be talking to you. Are you struggling mastering millions of records in a rule-based MTA? Is it possible to use AI instead for master data? Can we build data mastering pipelines directly on the data lake? Join me and find out. So glad to be connecting with all of you today on a topic which is very, very important for enterprise analytics, data mastering, and how to scale it using machine learning. So today we are going to discuss three main topics around building scalable data pipelines for enterprise data mastering. First of all, I will be covering the context of data mastering and what is data mastering? Where is it needed in an enterprise? Secondly, we will talk about the challenges at scale and of data variety in data mastering and how that affects analytics. Lastly, we will look at tools and techniques in machine learning that we can leverage to solve these challenges. So excited? Let's go. Let us now see what is data mastering and why is it needed. Now, data mastering is, as I was mentioning, is a very fundamental block of any analytics, any enterprise data journey. Because there are some fundamental questions every business asks to survive and to function. At the heart of any data-driven organization is the intense need to understand customer behavior. This information is things like what is the best way to acquire and retain customers? How to define and identify the most valuable customers? How can we figure out the best methods to proactively engage with the customers and interact with them? So, customer analytics, which almost all organizations on an analytics journey start with, which is the first thing that everybody does, it helps to make key business decisions for direct marketing, site selection, and customer relationship management via market segmentation and predictive analytics. Now, while running a business, what we understand is that customer acquisition is far more expensive than customer retention. And it is important to understand customer behavior to be able to retain them. So we need to answer questions like, so questions on customer value, like who are our most valuable customers? Are all customers equally valuable to the organization? When, how, how long, and how much should we invest to retain our customers? What are the spending patterns of our existing customers? Are they low spenders? Are they high spenders? Typically, high spenders, what we see is that high spenders tend to be more loyal and more repeat customers. Now, again, does our transaction with our customers yield us high margins? High margin customers, again, tend to be more loyal and more valuable to the organization. How recently did the customer last make a purchase? Are they looking at churning? So these are some key metrics here on the slide, like customer lifetime value, net promoter score. These are used to understand the customer behavior and its value to the organization. Now, once we understand and quantify the customer value in terms of LTV, in terms of net promoter score, in terms of customer satisfaction, in terms of customer effort score, we can become truly customer centric and understand the customer needs. We can proactively anticipate new needs to fulfill. By being data driven, we can drive customer experience through processes and technology transformation. But it's easier said than done because unfortunately, the way we save data is going to be a product centric view. Now, the customer data, as it is saved along product lines, there's a lot of data. And again, with a lot of data, there are a lot of truths. Really, which customer information do you really trust? And how do you integrate this? Now, lack of a complete unified view of the customer means that we cannot actually utilize all the data that the enterprise has. And what this leads to is that it impedes the organization's understanding of the customer needs and experiences and gives a poor customer value analytics. Because incomplete and inconsistent data can only hamper our analytics and it hurts our outreach and personalization. So, as a result of these data silos, where we have a product centric view instead of a customer centric view, the customer success and the customer experience suffers. Now, what is data mastering? When we looked at this problem where the data is actually siloed, it is saved along product lines or along departments, and we don't have a unified view, what data mastering does is it identifies firstly the core entities, product, customer, employee, suppliers across different business processes and helps us to build a trusted view of the entity. Now, this trusted view of the entity, for like, let's say the customer, is then linked to the other interactions and other entities to deliver analytics. So, in the customer case that we talked about, a master record is created for the customer by unifying the data across these different products and these different departments. And then this customer product, the customer master, is linked to the experience and behavior data, to the marketing and sales information, the product entities, and the relationships. And then this becomes the foundation for all analytics, all risk models, all compliance. And what we can do is, like, once we have this unified data, we can join and merge the customer data. And with this unified view, we can learn the buyer propensity. We can discover opportunities to cross sell and to upsell. We can build personalized communication and targeted channels. Companies can actually, once they have a unified view, I mean, they can really, really do a lot with their customers. They can build personalized communication and targeted channels. They can onboard customers faster and more accurately. Sales effectiveness can be increased by delivering products and services they want. You can anticipate needs of the customer and be there why they want, where they, through the channel that they prefer, just by knowing more about them. Again, the risk and management of risk and compliance to core business functions, understanding how much risk is associated with a customer or a household is something that can be done once we have a customer master. And privacy things like GDPR, the subject access request, where you have to know what customer data is saved where. Again, through a customer master, all those use cases are actually possible. Now, we talked about customer mastering. In the case of suppliers in procurement, what happens is that a typical procurement process involves multiple stakeholders, multiple systems. The vendor is registered in an ERP, then specifications are submitted and approved in another system. Inspection of vendor premises and compliance is done by another team, and they have their own process and application database. Contracting and legal are also involved in most of these procurement, and then they have additional data and insights. Now, the delivery team that approves the vendor supplies is another actor with their own systems. So there are a lot of systems, and the procurement supplier information is again spread across these different systems. Now, when we do supplier data mastering and you build this holistic view of the supplier, basically what we're doing is that supplier information across all the procurement systems that I just mentioned is integrated to build a trusted unified view. And then the supplier master, this one single golden truth, the master, the supplier master, is linked to procurement interactions and experience, to all the supply categories that we procure from the supplier, the inventory data that we have and the supplier has exposed to us, the contractual and the legal data, the purchase history, and other aspects of the supplier relationship. So vendor data consolidation again across these data silos gives us terrific insights about the supplier outlay across business units, regions, and geographies. Once we have this unified data, it's easy to understand the pricing consistencies across divisions, onboard new suppliers faster, and manage risk associated with the vendor location and labor practices. So similarly, when we integrate the other data assets like supplies, it can help us to share those supplies across divisions or figure out the best supplier for a given supply or drive pricing consistency across business units. So effectively, when we are saying data mastering, it is when people are realizing that they can derive even further value from the individual functional units, the operational silos, and we can get a lot more value by combining this data, this unit specific data systems, these silos, and use the collective wisdom, integrate all the behavioral and the experience data, and then make an informed choice. So, and not just limited to customers or suppliers, it could be products, it could be supplies, it could be employees. Typically, any noun, any entity that the business deals with. And the benefits are actually very fundamental for data mastering. As I was mentioning, cuts across product lines, defines the core of the enterprise on how you want to relate to your customer, to your suppliers, how you consume supplies. So all the fundamentals in terms of increasing revenue, decreasing the costs, and staying compliant in a risk-free fashion, the fundamental building blocks for the business are actually dependent on data mastering. Now that we understand data mastering, let us also look at why, how once when we are implementing data mastering and integrating these data silos, what are the things that we will encounter, what are the challenges we will come across, and why do those challenges exist? Because once we understand why those challenges exist, we can get into a solution mode and try to solve them. So overall, like when we're talking about data mastering, essentially we are talking about a lot of integration, and there are a lot of things that need to be considered in terms of business, in terms of who sponsors the project for data mastering. Is it a business benefit? Is it a pure technical benefit? I mean, there are a lot of business benefits as I outlined, but because they are spread across different business units, it is kind of difficult to quantify them. So, and then all the applications are actually sharing the data, and in turn, they are getting the enriched data. So, which department is really responsible for building it and managing it? And then, what kind of processes are needed for the interdepartment communication across geographies? So, these are some things when embarking on a data mastering journey, we need to be really cautious about in terms of who owns the data, what kind of access do they need, and how does the data mastering system impact the work processes existing in the enterprise currently, because it is cutting across almost all the business units, across all the technical systems that the enterprise has. Now, looking at the technical challenges, firstly, I think there is the different data silos themselves that we need to integrate. There will be lots of source systems. There will be lots of different formats because each of the source system will have its own format and a way to access its own data. Like the ERP will have a different way of accessing its data. The CRM will expose its own APIs. So these systems will all have different kinds of technologies and interfaces. And they're also often, they will be managed by different teams. So there is the access control issue as well that we need to make sure. Now, second, once we have the source systems and the format, and we've established a way through which we can connect to them and access the data. In data mastering, what we realize is that customers or suppliers or the entities that we're talking of in one data set, they will not be represented in the same way as the entity or the customer or the supplier in another. So the schemas will be really different. They can be varied across the entire organization in terms of attribute names, in terms of typos, in terms of types. Sorry, in terms of values that the attributes represent. So we need to figure out a way to unify these schema attributes. And these attributes from these different silos need to be mapped to a common golden schema. Now, some mapping can actually be pretty straightforward, like, last name maps to last name and first name maps to first name, or first underscore name maps to F name. But when we look across multiple systems, there can be various kinds of conventions. Sometimes the names may actually just not be representative of the attribute itself. So there is a lot of work when we look at multiple systems that needs to happen. Now then, after this, there are the record level variations. So we've unified these schemas and we've said that this attribute from the source schema represents this attribute in the target schema. But then when we look at within a record, which eventually is what we are trying to unify, there will be the variations in terms of salutations, there will be typos, there will be missing fields, there will be non-standard fields like city or country codes or phone numbers. Address fields typically have a lot of variations because it is free format. So humans, because they're entering data into the systems in multiple phase, many of the data records could come from partners. We could have different interfaces through which our systems have actually accumulated the data. And hence there would be a lot of variations in terms of all the typos, salutations, languages, abbreviations within the record itself. Now, after the record level variations, one challenge also is that these entities don't exist by themselves. They are related to other entities. Like a customer buys multiple products, a product may have multiple sub products. So there is this one to many and the many to many relationships within these entities that we need to take care of. And then, like for an example, a customer can have multiple addresses, a billing address for the credit card, and a shipping address where goods actually, the bought goods are to be delivered. The customers will have family relationships. And if they're disclosed, recording them and knowing about them helps us to serve them better. So when we are looking at data mastering, we need to make sure that we can actually model these real world relationships within our system. Like product lines, they typical organizations, product lines may collapse, or we may repackage an offering into a different SKU, and we need to be able to account for all these changes to understand the relationships better. So as we add more systems, more attributes, more records, the problem for data mastering soon starts becoming a problem of scale. Now, I had talked about differences at the level of a record, where the records representing an entity have typos, have errors. So let us look at this example here, where the records. So there are three records of a customer coming from three different systems. We have mapped the source attributes to the target attributes here. So they all conform to a single standard schema, but there are variations even within these three records. For example, the third record here has a salutation in the name, and it has a missing first name. There is a typo in the name in the second record, in the first name. In the address, as I was mentioning, addresses typically tend to be very, very messy, and there is a forward slash here. There's a missing house number and a typo. Telephones, if we don't standardize them, again, could be written in so many different ways. So in this case, we have no country code, no state code in the bracket, and there is only a state code in the brackets. There are leading zeros in the third record, leading spaces in the city name in the first record, and then a typo in the name of the city itself. Now, this scale problem is a very different, scale problem from most of the other stuff we kind of think about when we talk about scale. When we talk about scale, typically what we are saying is that, it's just the sheer number of records that we talk about. It's million records, it's a billion records, and that is what we quantify as scale. But unfortunately, when we are matching and we are, integrating records from different silos, what happens is that we cannot look at one single record. We have to look at a record in comparison with other records. So, so the scale problem here is manifold. Like if we have 10,000 records, what we have to do is we have to look at the remaining, for every record, we have to look at the remaining 9,999 records and make those comparisons. And what we see is that, because we need to look at everything, the number of comparisons we need to make increases quadratically. So as you can see from the slide here, a tenfold increase in the number of records leads to a hundredfold increase in the number of comparisons. And even at a million records, this problem soon becomes a problem of scale. So, I mean, a massively different scale problem from, the typical scale problems that we encounter. And it is essentially, it becomes unscalable pretty soon, even when our data is not really big data. And what happens is because of this, companies that even when they initiate a data mastering journey, they master one or two key domains, it takes a lot of time, and then they drop off because there is so much engineering and so much maintenance cost that it is too high to manage it. So it's typically what you do is you master and integrate some key systems for customer, and you kind of leave it at that, because adding more systems is it gets tough and tough. So the typical scale problem in terms of variety of data that we see that we want to master in terms of locations, in terms of customer, in terms of organizations, in terms of suppliers, in terms of product lines, that itself is huge. Then the number of records, even when they're not really big, even if they are 5 million or 10 million, the problem is massively computationally very expensive in terms of computation. So it becomes a scale problem. And then the, the number of data sources, again, can be pretty big. So, so that also becomes a scale problem. Now we look at, just if, so when we are talking about number of data sources being more, so let's look at an enterprise where we're looking at integrating, say, 80 source systems, and even if each source system has 20 attributes, it's actually 1600 attributes to map by hand for schema mapping. So that itself becomes quite a lot of work to do. So we've seen the challenges, which are nice and interesting to solve actually. and let us see what we can do to solve these data mastering challenges. Now, AI is essentially, you train a model. A model is a set of algorithms like a clustering or a classification algorithm on some data for which we know the results, which is like the label data. And then we apply that algorithm on new records for which we don't know the results, and we get a prediction. So maybe there is a way that we can actually apply AI to this data mastering problem and solve the issue and make scalable data pipelines. So, how do we apply AI? Like, firstly, I think we have to get to start with, we have to get some training data and data for which the results are already known, data which we know behaves in a certain way, over which we can actually train it. So, in the case of, data mastering, it is going to be records which belong to the same vendor, which records belong to the same customer. We can actually learn to group them together. Then which record is a stationary spend, we can learn to classify those kind of suppliers together. Then we can, once we have some training data, we can build the representations from that data. Now representations essentially are feature engineering, where we actually take the source data, put it in a form through which the patterns can be derived by the model and the algorithm. So in a pair of records which are matching, one feature could be how many characters match, does the city match, does the state match, uh, how many variations do we see in the first name. In the case of spend classification, it could be, the features could be what are the word vectors of the supplies, how many nouns does it have. So once we've done the feature engineering, we can actually build a model that fits the data, and essentially a clustering or a classification model, which when given the features can tell which bucket the record gets into, what we can make a prediction essentially out of that data. And then once we are kind of happy with the model performance, we can productionize it. And so when we productionize it, we kind of say that, we know that we can test it and we see that the predictions are accurate and the error rate is less. So we say that, this is ready to go into production, and we can build a data pipeline which derives the features from the raw data and applies the model and gets the prediction. So that essentially becomes a data mastering pipeline. And I think the good part here for AI is that if we've done a good job in choosing our model, the right algorithm, and the right features, if we build them out correctly, we will not need to, representative samples for each variation in our data. So we were seeing that there are so many variations while we were data matching, but we will not need every variation to represent in the training, and the AI model should be able to generalize. So this is where typically rules fail and AI technologies shine, because they can generalize. And if it is overgeneralizing, there are techniques to balance that out as well. Now, AI is promising, but at the same time, AI is not a silver bullet. So when we are applying AI to any problem, and especially to data mastering, we need to make sure that the problem is really an AI problem. So, so I was talking about hierarchies and organizational hierarchies, or so when we say about organizational hierarchies, that's a relationship which we want to model, or which supplier has a master, has a parent supplier. What kind of relationships do they hold between them? Now, that relationship from a data mastering perspective is crucial to us. But unfortunately, that is not something through which we can actually learn from the data. So, the data has actually no signals for us to learn from. So, that is not a problem which we can actually solve through AI. It cannot be featureized. So, we have to really be cautious in terms of, if the data really does have those patterns, and can we build training data quickly so that we can apply AI to these problems. Now, Training data, as I was mentioning, is critical. I mean, how do we train a model? How do we get it to learn, to make our predictions? It has to have a place from where it starts. And now, how do we get the training data? Sometimes we are just lucky. We have a rule based old data mastering system, or we have, we've done hand labeling of some training data through some, um, um, due to some business needs urgently. And we have some training data lying around from some previous efforts. So that could be leveraged, but that happens very rarely. And in most of the common cases, we actually don't have training data. So one option is that, we embark on a journey. We say that, let's create training data, let's hire some workers, build training data. But then that defeats the purpose. We don't want to spend too much time building training data, because the end goal is not to build training data, but it is to train the model. So why not use machine learning tools themselves to build the training data and then learn from user feedback through a technique called active learning. So, what active learning basically does is it picks up samples of data from the pool of data that we have and asks a user to label it. And it is kind of smart. It doesn't pick up everything. So, when humans are going to label, like where we just, without machine learning, we just start labeling, we'll pick up a lot of samples and we'll just manually start labeling them. But what active learning does is that it will build up the training data pretty fast, and then it will uh, ask someone. So it will actually pick out only edge cases. It will be very frugal about, which cases uh, uh, it will ask the human to label. And because of that, the training data can actually be built very fast. And then the good part is that once you've set up the active learning, you can just get, so we actually don't need technical people to do the active learning. I mean, that the labeling can actually be done by the humans who understand the business context and who are trying to solve the problem. So they can actually, accurately categorize the data. So, and it can be very frugal as well. So active learning becomes very frugal because it is only picking out edge cases. Now, active learning is one technique. The other technique that we can look at in terms of creating training data is weak supervision. And what weak supervision does is that it you so it enables a person to write some functions or rules programmatically. And basically, what we're saying is that in the case of, let's say, matching, what we're saying is that if the first name is a match and the country is a match and the last name is a match, mark the user as belonging to the same customer. Now, it is not, now this is going to be noisy. It is these labels that we generate uh, will be will not be accurate, because you will have different functions. Some of them will give incorrect labels to the data. But what the weak supervision will do is that even when these functions are not 100% accurate, which they are not, uh, the generated labels, the noisy labels, the weak supervision algorithms will learn from them. They will cancel out the noise and they will learn from the noisy label. So it will know how to cancel or attach weights, so that if one function is, saying it is a match, the second is saying it is not a match, it will know exactly what to do. And there are standard libraries like Snorkel from Stanford, which can actually be leveraged for using weak supervision effectively. Now, we talked about the data mastering problem, and these are some areas where AI can actually be effectively used for solving the scale issue and building scalable data pipelines. Where, when we're talking about schema mapping or schema integration, the system can actually suggest to us which attributes are the same. And we can, instead of manually labeling or manually searching for the attributes to map, the recommendations with confidence levels can flow from the system, and it will save us a lot of data integration effort. Now, so one or the other problem that I had mentioned in terms of data matching, which is like a core mastering capability that is needed, and without it, the mastering cannot really work. So a traditional rule-based system, by writing, just rules and algorithms, will not be able to do it very well because it is also a scale issue. But then we can look at applying AI there and see if that can actually solve our problem. So what happens is that if we try to solve it traditionally by writing, functional programming or writing logic for it, there are a lot of noisy data that gets matched to each other. And a lot of times, companies will have to employ data stewards who sit through the false positives and that the data mastering system is churning out. Now, data classification, which product belongs to which taxonomy, which supply uh, belongs to which hierarchy, whether they are UNSPSC, E-class, that is again something that we can look at using AI here. And in terms of improving data quality, anomaly and pattern detection is what AI is all about. So why not use it for data quality? It's going to be challenging. It's not easy, but those are some things that we can look at doing. Now, a conventional way in which schema mapping is done. So I was mentioning, right, that schema mapping for data mastering tends to be challenging because there are multiple systems, and we need to really map them by hand, which gets onerous after a time. So typically, a conventional way is that we look at the input schema and we look at those fields, and then we look at the output that we want to generate, and we say that this field maps to this field in the output. Now, with one or two systems, this is fine. But when data mastering, we are talking about enterprise systems, multiple enterprise systems. We are talking about a lot of manual mapping, which can become very tedious. So instead of doing that, how about getting the system to actually suggest to us by looking at the column contents, by looking at the name of the column, that the user can map it to this output. And applying AI to the problem of schema mapping, essentially what we are doing is that we are getting the system to predict which columns are similar based on their names and their content, and then we cluster those similar columns, and we make those recommendations and the predictions. So it makes the life of the mapper pretty easy. And if the user is mapping something manually, if they are overriding, we can learn from that and feed that back into the recommendation system. So in terms of features, what we can do is, like, we are finding similarity across these columns. So build feature vectors from the column data, what kind of fields it, what kind of values it contains, what are the variations in those fields, and then we can use those to make those predictions. And once we have that, it is far easier for us to bring in new systems, to map new systems to our data mastering. Now, for data matching, when we do it in a traditional rule-based system, there is a ton of activity that we need to perform. We need to find the patterns in the data manually. So we spend a good deal of time profiling and learning about the data and its patterns. We get the data to a standard format, replacing abbreviations by complete names. So because we can't, compare, how do we compare Mr. Marcus with Mr. Ho, or Mr. Ho with Mr. Marcus Ho, or C2002 uh, Ananda Avenue with C2002 Ananda Ave? So what we do is that we profile the data, and we replace, we get them to a standard format, like replacing the abbreviations by complete names, like AV is converted to avenue and ST is converted to street. We could strip off uh, the titles, or we could, get them to remove all the commas. So we do a lot of standardization. And because we don't want to, we want them to be as easy to compare as possible. And because we don't want to compare everything with everything, if you remember the slide that I showed to you, where we were making 10,000 comparisons, and that itself was within 10,000 records itself, there were a huge lot of comparisons to make. We basically define a fuzzy match key where the records which are sharing the key will only those records will be matched. And so this could be, the fuzzy match key could be a combination of, say, city, country, pin code, some bits of the first name or the last name. And once we do that, we define the fuzzy match process, where we define the rules of similarity by which the records will match with each other. So we say if this amount of characters are matching to each other, if they are looking same to each other, uh, in terms of, the city, then this is a match. If it's looking, if it's a 70% match in terms of characters in their first name, it is probably a match. So we define that fuzzy match process and the rules for the similarity. And because it is computationally intensive, we do a lot of database tuning in a non-AI system. However, when we look at using AI for data matching, we can, instead of doing all the effort that we did earlier, we can solve it very elegantly through AI. We can use active learning to quickly bootstrap the matching rules. So the system can actually show us, what are the matches or the non-matches, and instead of codifying them by programs, we can get the system to learn the matching rules. So for an example, instead of saying that, build a condition that if the city is matching and if the characters in the name are matching by 90%, then call it a match, we could actually build a classifier which takes care of all these features and then combines these attribute level similarity to record level similarity. And we can use active learning to quickly build out the training samples. And the user, when we are doing active learning, the user will say if a pair is a match or a non-match, and then this feedback is used to tune the classifier. So if we do that, if we train, a clustering and a classification algorithm on the data matching, we don't need to do any of this, and we can pretty much scale to the volumes of data that we see in our enterprise. And how does this look like? A pretty simple interface in terms of active learning, in terms of classification training, where the system shows out some pairs to the user. The user will label them. So a few pairs are shown to the user. The user labels them. The system learns from the label, picks out a few more edge cases, and then this trains itself on the label data. So the process of training, data creation, as well as of learning the fuzzy match key and of the match rules can actually all be done intuitively through this kind of an interface. Now, there are other areas where, I talked about in data mastering, where we can actually we apply AI, which are big areas of concern for an enterprise in terms of, getting up to speed, getting data mastering done quickly. So things like data quality anomaly detection, automated transformations, unstructured mastering. Now, each of them are, topics in detail. There are a lot of things that we can do around them, like data quality. Essentially, it is, finding records which do not conform to specific patterns. And that is something which actually we can look at applying AI to. Now, in terms of automated transformations, what happens is that many cases, I mean, straight off schema mapping is probably okay. But many times what will happen is that the let's say the gender is mentioned um, as M or F in one database and one or two in another database. Now, if the system could actually learn to suggest these kind of transformations to us instead of we wrangling and preparing the data, it will become really powerful for us. And those are things that machine learning or AI can actually help us to build. If there is a first name last name column, and there is a in another database which we are trying to data master, we have just a complete concatenation of first name last name as one single field. Maybe it can suggest to us that you can concatenate to these when you're trying to map them, or you can link these two together, or you can split them up together. Similarly, for formats like dates, they tend to be in different formats in different systems, and AI can actually be effectively used to say, once they have been mapped, that you can transform from source to target, suggest some patterns, and the user can actually choose which pattern to apply. So those could be use cases for data mastering and scaling it up in terms of the data pipeline. And then there could be unstructured mastering, because not all data is in the enterprise associated with an entity is going to be in structured format. It could be just loose, like emails or documents. And if we could use advanced NLP and AI techniques, we could get out the entities which are associated with a document, the contract document, the legal documents, and associate them with the customer master or the vendor master. We actually can go a long way to getting a 360 view. So those are again areas where AI can actually be applied to scale up, to functionally provide to us what we want to achieve in data mastering, and to scale it up to the volumes and the variety of data that we possess. So that is pretty much what I wanted to cover in my presentation today, and happy to take any questions uh, now. So I have one question here, which is, in what direction will data mastering go in the future? Uh, so data mastering in the future is going to be smart. It is going to be fast. It is not going to take us months and years to integrate two systems, and then a few more months to integrate another system. I mean, we talk to companies who say that within an existing master data management system, they take 7 months to onboard a new system which they've acquired through merger and acquisition. I believe something like that should be reduced to maybe a week or so. And data mastering would be very, very automated. It would be very smart. It would be AI enabled, and it will scale to the volume of data that we tend to see in an organization. Also, being able to master all the key domains, not just customer, is something that is where data mastering, I expect, would go in the future. So, so are there any other questions? So I believe there are no further questions. So I think I would just like to thank everybody for attending this presentation and helping, being there and listening to me. I really hope you enjoyed some of the direction that I mentioned in terms of data mastering. And I'm going to head into the Ask Me Anything now. So feel free to, catch me and discuss some of the enterprise data problems that you are seeing. Thank you once again for being a part of this presentation. Thank you so much for your time and have a great day. Thank you. Bye bye.